let's kick it off. Okay, so just to start with, I'm going to talk about a situation where over here I've got an on-premises location, and what I've done here is I've actually created a number of different backup jobs, and these backup jobs are actually created as tiers, right? So if we have a look here, I've got T1 workloads, T2 workloads, and T3 workloads. So as you can see, as we move into here, the virtual machines that are selected. So what that means effectively is that any VM that's created, and when I create my VMs, I create them using automation such as code. I actually add tags to every VM that's created. Over here, we've got this T1 workload. We know that this T1 workload at the moment is covering 147 gigs worth of workloads, but we understand that if any VM gets created after this, it's going to be added to this particular job. So what I've done here is I've created a way that we can classify our workloads, and that's going to be important on the other side when we do the recoveries, right? So that's pretty much all that there is to show on this end, the fact and how I've set it up. You can see here that I've got a couple of object storage repositories. So I've got an AWS repository, I've got a GCP repository. If we actually clicked on the Scale-Up Backup repository, you can see here that I'm sending these workloads primarily to this Sober 01. And you can see here I've got the performance tier, which comprises of 2 local repositories, and then the capacity tier here, which is extended to use the Google Cloud. And I'm doing copy and move. So I'm leveraging the copy functionality, which gives us that efficiency, but I'm copying. The copying is important here because the copying is what's going to leverage the ability for us to do that on-demand recovery, leveraging a lower RPO. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch back to a different screen, but just imagine for an example now that we've had a disaster. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to that desktop. And what I have here is I actually have a previously deployed VMware Cloud and AWS vCenter, right? So the thing about VMware Cloud and AWS, it takes 2 hours to deploy from go to woe. So that's okay if it's an on-demand situation. So you know that if you've got a disaster that's happened, part of your strategy, part of your DR plan is the fact that you know that you're going to take 2 hours to spin up an SDDC. Once that's spun up, now we can go into action. So over here, just imagine this was a clean SDDC. You can see here that I've just pre-provisioned a couple of VMs. One is V11, but I could actually leverage Terraform as an example. So to deploy those machines, I leveraged this online module that is available on GitHub, which basically deploys this VM. Almost in a couple of minutes. You can see here that it took 2 minutes and 59 seconds to deploy this VM. Once the VM is deployed, then what I can do is I can leverage automation tools, such as code tools, such as Chocolatey, we've got Ansible, Chef, you choose, and we can actually deploy Veeam into that machine. So really, within 2 hours to deploy the software-defined data center, plus the 3 minutes to deploy the VM using Terraform, plus about 10 to 15 minutes to actually deploy and configure Veeam automatically, we now have a Veeam server up and running. Okay, and this Veeam server in theory is clean, but it's ready to go, ready for action for this recovery process. So obviously we want to add it to the SDDC. This can obviously be, automated through PowerShell as well. So what we can see here is that we've got a clean backup and replication server. You can see here we're connected to a vCenter, but we haven't got any backup proxies. So to increase performance and scalability, Veeam needs backup proxies. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to dynamically deploy 3 backup proxies using a project that I wrote called Project Autosecure, which is actually available on GitHub. And you can see the code base here in Visual Studio. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to load that. I'm going to take us to this screen here, and then I'm basically going to fire up Project Autosecure to deploy, let's have a look here, 3 Windows proxies. Okay, so there's a number of different options here, but effectively what I'm going to do is leverage Terraform and PowerShell to deploy the VMs and then configure them in Veeam Backup Replication straight away. So let's go through and do this. So what it's going to do here straight away, we're going to go and talk to the vCenter, the SDDC, and if we have a look here, we just start to get some machines being cloned. There you go. So we've got these proxies that are being cloned from the template. And then what's going to happen is that we're going to deploy them and actually configure them as proxies. So let's come back when that's ready. All right, so now what we're doing is we're now adding the machines that have been fed back through a JSON file with their details. We're now going to basically have them configured within Veeam Backup and Replication. So automatically, the PowerShell code of Project Autosecuro is talking to the Veeam server, and it's uploading the packages that are required on those machines that we deployed to make them workable in Veeam and for them to become proxies. So let's give this a couple of seconds for it to pop up. Okay, and as you can see here, now we've got the 3 proxies that were added automatically through the automations. That's pretty cool. So now we've got our Veeam server, we've got our proxies deployed. Now we're going to actually look at creating that object storage repository and getting the workloads back, those tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 workloads. So if we have a look at home here, you can see that we've actually got no backup points listed in the tree here. So what we're going to do, go to backup infrastructure, and what we'll need to do is create these repositories automatically. Well, not automatically, they can be created automatically through the PowerShell, and I've actually got that capability here. And by the way, what you're seeing in terms of the PowerShell is going to be available on GitHub. Project Autosecuro is already, and what you're about to see will be up there. But what I've done is I've actually gone and recreated this just to save some time. So you can see that I've recreated as they were on premises on the target site. Now we're at the on-demand recovery site within VMware Cloud. Now what we can do is we can do a import backups. So on this Google Cloud, we're going to import the backup, and what it's going to go do is read all the information it leaves on the object storage and effectively get Veeam Backup Replication to build an index of what backup points are in existence on the actual cloud tier itself. So let's go here, ready for backing up imports. So we're going to go and finish. And now what it's going to do is it's going to go through and it's found one repository, it's synchronizing that repository, and it's going to actually go and import the backup. So it's importing backup 1 out of 3. So let's come back when this is done, all 3 of them. It should take about 3 minutes. All right, so that's now finishing up there. Now all backup repository synchronization has been completed successfully. And now if we go back into the home, you can now see that we have backups listed under object storage, and you can see that those job names are there, the T1 workload, T2 workload, and T3 workload. Now I've done that for a very good reason, because now what we do is we can granularly control the on-demand recovery of those workloads into the software-defined data center, okay? So what I'm actually going to go and do is I'm going to go back here. This script basically has the ability to restore, and again, this script will be available on GitHub after this particular presentation, but effectively, I've got the granular option here to go and restore the T1 workloads. I can actually, on this script as well, do GCP storage. I can actually mount that AWS S3 repository that you saw. We can configure them. We can restore to EC2. So that's the other ability here, to directly stream to EC2 if we wanted to. We can do a restore to all, or we can actually just restore T1, T3, and we can mount. So everything that I showed you basically can be done with this particular PowerShell script as well. So let's go ahead and actually, for the purpose of the demo, just restore the T1. So this is going to go out, the PowerShell is going to execute, it's going to look at these recovery points, and it's going to kick off a recovery to the vCenter for these T1 workloads. So there you go. So straight away, you can see that running, we have 5. And now what we're doing is we're streaming these data directly off the object storage repository. Now, what's critical here, and if I actually bring up our Task Explorer, we'll start to see that we've got these concurrent connections through to Google. Okay, so this, trust me, these are connected to, it might not look like it. Google's DNS names are quite interesting, but it's connected to Google Cloud Storage. And what we're actually doing here now is the only time that we're starting to download data. What we're doing is we're downloading those metadata points. So remember how I talked about the fact that we offload and we dehydrate the VBK files in the object storage. What we're doing here is we're reconstructing the metadata shells to be able to then reference the data directly off the object storage and stream it down. So this is the first part of this. So this takes a couple of minutes basically to go through and reconstruct those metadata shells locally into a temp location. And from here, what we're going to do is we're going to kick off the actual restoration of these machines into the SDDC. And if we go back, we should see, yes, we can see the creation of these machines. So these are starting to be created. and then we'll basically stream the data down to complete the restoration. So you can see here that these tier 1 machines are getting created on the vCenter, on the software-defined data center, and now we're going to start to actually do the actual download of those machines, and that'll kick off. So let's come back when these machines are actually restored completely. Okay, so we're nearly ready there. So those tier 1 workloads have almost all been restored. We're just waiting on this one last machine. Let's take a look and see some of the restore performances that we're getting off the Google object storage. Now, if this was Amazon S3 being directly on this VMware Cloud and AWS, we'd get some really significantly higher line rates, because obviously we're talking through that S3 gateway through the local ENI. But because we're going over the internet, we're sort of maxing out about 128 megs per second. But overall, if you have a look here, we're basically restoring a 230 gig machine. And at the moment, it hasn't taken longer than, say, 10 minutes. So that's a really good line rate to download and restore these tier 1 workloads. So let's wait for that to finish. But as we go back and have a look, let's see what's happening on the actual vCenter itself. We can see that these VMs are up and running. And now, obviously, these workloads are up and running. Your business is back up, the workloads are in play, and you can start to progressively actually go through and recover those tier 2 and tier 3 workloads as well. So again, while this is finishing off, this is a really good example of how you can leverage all the technologies that we've looked at. The object storage technology, when copying data up to the object storage repository, leveraging Cloud Tier and Scale-Up Backup Repository, we can leverage that for on-demand recovery, like what I've shown now, but also think about migration. That's another great use case. And also dev test. If you wanted to leverage a VMware Cloud, no matter where that is, for dev test, this is a way to get the workloads there without having to set up complex networking and whatnot. It's a really, really straightforward way to get the workloads recovered back into that SDDC. Again, just very quickly as a recap, talking about automation for day 0 and beyond. You've seen a lot of this in action over this demo. You've seen us leverage Terraform, PowerShell. We've talked about the ability to leverage Chef and Ansible, and also Chocolatey to deploy Veeam servers. So again, Veeam works very, very well with automation to dynamically deploy and discover. And these are some automation resources for you guys if you want to go and have a look at the ways to deploy Veeam. And with that, thanks for watching.